Chapter 31. Now, as though JP's finger were pointing me the way, I started north to my mountain. It was the morning of June 18, 1956. I came down and said goodbye to Christine and thanked her for everything, and walked down the road. She waves from the grassy yard. It's going to be lonely around here with everybody gone and no big huge parties on weekends. She really enjoyed everything that had gone on. There, she was standing in the yard, barefooted, with little barefooted Prajna, as I walked off along the horse meadow. I had an easy trip north, as though JP's best wishes for me to get to my mountain that could be kept forever were with me. On 101, I immediately got a ride from a teacher of social studies from Boston originally, who used to sing on Cape Cod and had fainted just yesterday at his buddy's wedding because he had been fasting. When he left me off at Cloverdale, I bought supplies for the road: a salami, cheddar cheese wedge, rye crisp, and also some dates for dessert, all put away neatly in my food wrappers. I still had peanuts and raisins left over from our last hike together. JP had said, I won't be needing those peanuts and raisins on that freighter. I recalled with a twinge of sadness how JP was always so dead serious about food, and I wish the whole world was dead serious about food instead of silly rockets and machines and explosives, using everybody's food money to blow their heads off anyway. I hiked about a mile after eating my lunch in back of a garage, up to a bridge on the Russian River, where, in gray gloom, I was stuck for as much as 3 hours. But suddenly I got an unexpected short ride from a farmer with a tick that made his face twitch, with his wife and boy, to a small town, Preston, where a truck driver offered me a ride all the way to Eureka. Eureka, I yelled, and then he got talking to me and said, God dang, I get lonesome driving this rig. I want someone to talk to all night. I'll take you all the way to Crescent City if you want. This was a little off my route, but farther north than Eureka, so I said okay. The guy's name was Ray Breton. He drove me 280 miles all night in the rain, talking ceaselessly about his whole life, his brothers, his wife, his sons, his father, and that humble redwood forest in a restaurant called Forest of Arden. I had a fabulous dinner of fried shrimp with a huge strawberry pie and vanilla ice cream for dessert, and a whole pot of coffee, and he paid for the whole works. I got him off talking about his troubles to talk about the last things he said. Yeah, those who are good stay in heaven. They've been in heaven from the beginning, which was very wise. We drove through the rainy night and arrived at Crescent City at dawn in a gray fog, a small town by the sea, and parked the truck in the sand by the beach and slept an hour. Then he left me after buying me a breakfast of pancakes and eggs, probably sick and tired of paying for all my meals, and I started walking out of Crescent City and over on Eastwood Road, Highway 199, to get back to Big Shot 99 that would shoot me to Portland and Seattle faster than the more picturesque but slower coast road. Suddenly, I felt so free, I began to walk on the wrong side of the road and sticking out my thumb from that side, hiking like a Chinese saint to nowhere, for no reason, going to my mountain to rejoice. Poor little angel world. I suddenly didn't care anymore. I'd walk all the way. But just because I was dancing along on the wrong side of the road and didn't care, anybody began to pick me up immediately. A gold miner with a small caterpillar up front, being hauled by his son. And we had a long talk about the woods, the Siskiyou Mountains, through which we were driving toward Grants Pass, Oregon, and how to make a good baked fish, he said, just by lighting a fire in the clean yellow sand by a creek and then burying the fish in the hot sand after you've scraped away the fire and just leaving it there for a few hours and taking it out and cleaning it of sand. He was very interested in my rucksack and plans. He left me off at a mountain village, very similar to Bridgeport, California, where JP and I had sat in the sun. I walked out a mile and took a nap in the woods, right in the heart of the Siskiyou Range. I woke up from my nap feeling very strange in the Chinese unknown fog. I walked on the same way, wrong side, got a ride at Kirby from a blonde used car dealer to Grants Pass, and there After a fat cowboy in a gravel truck with a malicious grin on his face deliberately tried to run over my rucksack on the road, I got a ride from a sad logger boy in a tin hat, going very fast across a great swooping up and down Dream Valley Thruway to Canyonville, where, as in a dream, a crazy store truck full of gloves for sale stopped and the driver, Ernest Peterson, chatting amiably all the way and insisting that I sit on the seat that faced him so that I was being zoomed down the road backward, took me to Eugene, Oregon. He talked about everything under the sun, bought me 2 beers, and even stopped at several gas stations and hung out displays of gloves. He said, "My father was a great man. His saying was, there are more horses' asses than horses in this world. He was a mad sports fan, and timed outdoor track meets with a stopwatch, and rushed around fearlessly and independently in his own truck, defying local attempts to get him in the unions. At red nightfall, he bade me farewell near a sweet pond outside Eugene. There I intended to spend the night. I spread my bag out under a pine in a dense thicket across the road from cute suburban cottages that couldn't see me and wouldn't see me because they were all looking at television anyway, and ate my supper and slept 12 hours in the bag, waking up only once in the middle of the night to put on mosquito repellent. At morning, I could see the mighty beams of the Cascade Range, the northernmost end of which would be my mountain on the skirt of Canada, 400 more miles north. The morning brook was smoky because of the lumber mill across the highway. I washed up in the brook and took off after one short prayer over the beads Jakey had given me in Matterhorn Camp. Adoration to emptiness of the divine Buddha head. I immediately got a ride on the open highway from 2 tough young hombres to Outech Junction City, where I had coffee and walked 2 miles to a roadside restaurant that looked better and had pancakes, and then walking along the highway rocks, cars zipping by, wondering how I'd ever get to Portland, let alone Seattle. I got a ride from a little funny light-haired house painter with spattered shoes and 4 pint cans of cold beer, who also stopped at a roadside tavern for more beer. And finally, we were in Portland, crossing vast eternity bridges as draws went up behind us to allow crane barges through in the big smoky river city scene surrounded by pine ridges. In downtown Portland, I took the 25-cent bus to Vancouver, Washington, ate a Coney Island hamburger there, then out on the road, 99, where a sweet young mustached, one-kidney bodhisattva Oki picked me up and said, "I'm so proud I picked you up, someone to talk to." And everywhere we stopped for coffee, he played the pinball machine with dead seriousness, and also he picked up all hitchhikers on the road. First, a big drawling Okie from Alabama, then a crazy sailor from Montana who was full of crazed intelligent talk, and we balled right up to Olympia, Washington, at 80 miles per hour, then up Olympic Peninsula on curvy roads to the naval base at Bremerton, Washington, where a 50-cent ferry ride was all that separated me from Seattle. We said goodbye, and the Okie bum and I went on the ferry. I paid his fare in gratitude for my terrific good luck on the road, and even gave him handfuls of peanuts and raisins, which he devoured hungrily, so I also gave him salami and cheese. Then, while he sat in the main room, I went top deck as the ferry pulled out in the cold drizzle to dig and enjoy Puget Sound. It was 1 hour sailing to the port of Seattle, and I found a half pint of vodka stuck in the deck rail concealed under a Time magazine, and just casually drank it and opened my rucksack and took out my warm sweater to go under my rain jacket and paced up and down all alone on the cold fog-swept deck, feeling wild and lyrical. And suddenly, I saw that the Northwest was a great deal more than the little vision I had of it, of Japhy in my mind. It was miles and miles of unbelievable mountains, grooking on all horizons in the wild, broken clouds. Mount Olympus and Mount Baker, a giant orange sash in the gloom over the Pacific ward skies that led, I knew, toward the Hokkaido Siberian desolations of the world. I huddled against the bridge house, hearing the Mark Twain talk of the skipper and the wheelmen inside. In the deep and dusk fog ahead, the big red neon saying, Port of Seattle, and suddenly everything Japhy had ever told me about Seattle began to seep into me like cold rain. I could feel it and see it now, and not just think it. It was exactly like he said. Wet, immense, timbered, mountainous, cold, exhilarating, challenging. The ferry nosed in at the pier on Alaskan Way, and immediately I saw the totem poles in old stores and the ancient 1880s style switchcoat with sleepy firemen chugging up and down the waterfront spur like a scene from my own dreams. The old Casey Jones locomotive of America, the only one I ever saw that old outside of Western movies. The only one I ever saw that old outside of Western movies, but actually working and hauling boxcars in the smoky gloom of the Magic City. I immediately went to a good, clean Skid Row hotel, the Hotel Stevens, got a room for the night for $1.75, and had a hot tub bath and a good long sleep in the morning. In the morning I shaved and walked out First Avenue and accidentally found all kinds of Goodwill stores with wonderful sweaters and red underwear for sale, and I had a big breakfast with 5-cent coffee in the crowded market morning with blue sky and clouds scudding overhead and waters of Puget Sound sparkling and dancing under old piers. It was real true Northwest. At noon, I checked out of the hotel with my new wool socks and bandanas and things all packed in gladly, and walked out to 99 a few miles out of town and got many short rides. Now I was beginning to see the Cascades on the northeast horizon. Unbelievable jags and twisted rock and snow-covered immensities, enough to make you go. The road ran right through a dreamy fertile valleys of the Stillaquamish and the Skagit, rich butterfat valleys with farms and cows browsing under the tremendous background of snow-pure heaps. The further north I hitched, the bigger the mountains got, till I finally began to feel afraid. I got a ride from a fellow who looked like a bespectacled, careful lawyer in the conservative car, but turned out he was a famous Bat Lindstrom, the hardtop racing champion, and his conservative automobile had in it a souped-up motor that could make it to go 170 miles an hour. But he just demonstrated it by gunning it at a red light to let me hear the deep hum of power. Then I got a ride from a lumberman who said he knew the forest rangers where I was going and said, the Skagit Valley is second only to the Nile for fertility. He left me off at a highway IG, which was the little highway to 17A that wound into the heart of the mountains and in fact would come to a dead end as a dirt road at Diablo Dam. Now I was really in the mountain country. The fellows who picked me up were loggers, uranium prospectors, farmers. They drove me through the final big town of Skagit Valley, Cedro-Woolley, a farming market town. And then out as the road got narrower and more curved among cliffs in the Skagit River, which we'd crossed on 99 as a dreaming valley river with meadows on both sides. It was now a pure torrent of melted snow pouring narrow and fast between muddy snag shores. Cliffs began to appear on both sides. The snow-covered mountains themselves had disappeared, receded from my view. I couldn't see them anymore, but now I was beginning to feel them more.